Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today's story is a tough one, mostly because it involves my favorite person in the world, my little brother, and a line I crossed that may have permanently fractured my relationship with his wife. This isn't about me being a meddling sister. This is about me watching the person I care about the most completely lose himself under the weight of an impossible load, all while his partner was actively choosing to scroll past the chaos. I desperately wanted to help him, but in trying to speak the truth, I was immediately branded the villain. So let me set the scene. I'm Maya, I'm 27, and my little brother is Ethan, also 27. He's my best friend, and we are incredibly close. He and his wife, Sarah, who is 25, had their first baby, a beautiful little boy, about 5 months ago. Ethan works a demanding job in finance. We're talking 40 to 50 hours a week, sometimes more when deadlines hit. Sarah made the decision to be a stay-at-home mom, or a SAHM. That was their arrangement. Ethan provides the sole income and Sarah handles the baby in the house. It's a classic split, and one I fully supported, especially given how rough the first few months are. I live about 10 minutes away from them, and because I love them and mostly because I love my nephew, I drop by often to help. When the baby was first born, I was practically a second set of hands, helping with laundry, cleaning, and just generally giving Sarah a break. I know being a new mom is brutal. I was never judgmental. I fully went into this situation ready to shower them with support. The first couple of months were messy, as expected. There was spit up, exhaustion, and plenty of panic. But they were doing the work together, a united front, even if Ethan was working his crazy hours. But around the third or fourth month, things started to shift. It was subtle at first. I'd noticed things when I visited, and I always told myself, give her a break, Maya. She's exhausted. She's adjusting. But the small things started adding up. I'd go over there and the house would be, well, it would be a complete mess. I'm not talking about normal new parent clutter. I'm talking about a genuine, overwhelming state of domestic decay. I'd walk in and the sink would be piled high with dishes, crusty formula bottles everywhere, the kind of mess that takes hours to chip away at. The laundry hamper would be overflowing onto the floor, smelling vaguely sour. And the baby, bless his heart, would often be fussing, not necessarily crying hysterically, but just constantly unhappy and unattended to. And every single time I walked in, I would find Sarah in the same position, in bed, scrolling on her phone or binge-watching a TV show. I remember one specific Tuesday afternoon visit. I showed up unannounced, just bringing over a quick dinner I'd made, a lasagna, something they could just heat up. I walked in, and the baby was wailing in his crib, sitting in a clearly soiled diaper. The living room looked like a tornado hit it, but I could hear the distinct sound of Netflix coming from the bedroom. I walk in, and there she is. Headphones in, blanket pulled up, literally watching a show on her laptop. When she saw me, she pulled the blanket down and gave me a tired smile. Oh, hey, Maya. Sorry, I was just taking 5 minutes. I'm completely losing it. I smiled back, even though my blood pressure had definitely jumped. I just said, no worries, I brought dinner. But the little guy sounds like he needs a change. I ended up changing the baby, calming him down, putting the lasagna in the fridge, and then spending the next hour cleaning up the kitchen, all while she stayed in bed. She didn't even offer to take the baby when I was trying to scrub the burnt rice off the stove. She just thanked me for coming. I left that day frustrated but still telling myself, she's a new mom. It's hard to prioritize. But I was starting to see a pattern that wasn't exhaustion. It was active neglect of the home and a total reliance on everyone else to pick up the slack. Sarah's 5 minutes break seemed to be happening for hours every single day, and the house was reflecting that extended break time. I never once saw her doing the laundry, washing the dishes, or actively engaging with the baby unless he was freshly changed and ready for a feed. The real red flag for me was Ethan. He started looking absolutely destroyed. He was always calling me, not to vent, but to ask basic questions like, hey, can you remind me how long you boiled the baby bottles for? Or can you drop off diapers on your way over? Sarah forgot to order them. He looked stressed, tired, and deeply unhappy. This man was working 50-plus hours a week, carrying the entire financial burden for their new family, and he was still coming home only to find a second full-time job waiting for him, cleaning the house and taking care of a fussy baby. I started dropping by on weekend evenings just to check on him, and the routine was always the same. I would find Ethan trying to tidy up or dealing with a crisis, and Sarah would be relaxing. I started to notice that Ethan wasn't just helping with the baby. He was doing the majority of the non-work, non-feeding care, including all the domestic chores. The arrangement had subtly shifted from she handles the house and baby during the day. He helps in the evening to she rests all day, and he does everything else. This went on for weeks, and I tried every subtle strategy in the book. I offered to take Sarah out for a real break, thinking she just needed a change of scenery. She'd always say no, preferring to stay in and, you guessed it, watch TV. I even tried bringing my own cleaning supplies and making a big, loud show of scrubbing the kitchen counters, hoping that the guilt would prompt her to join me or take over. It never did. She'd thank me profusely and then go back to her phone. My frustration was building into a silent roar, but I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to cause drama, and I didn't want to be the stereotypical judgmental sister-in-law. The breaking point happened last weekend. It was Saturday evening, and Ethan called me, not asking for supplies or a reminder, but just saying 2 words: "I'm losing it." His voice was shaking, and I knew instantly that this was a real emergency. I dropped everything and raced over to their house, only 10 minutes away. I walked in, and the scene that greeted me was pure, absolute chaos. The smell hit me first, a mix of dirty laundry, stale milk, and just general uncleaned house smell. The living room was completely decimated. Baby toys everywhere, blankets piled in corners, and yes, another stack of crusty bottles on the coffee table. But the real devastating sight was in the kitchen. Finn, my strong, capable little brother, was standing at the stove, trying to sauté something with one hand, while simultaneously holding our 5-month-old nephew in a carrier with the other. The baby was crying, a loud, desperate, unhappy cry, and Ethan was trying to bounce him while stirring the pot. He looked like he was about to burst into tears himself. His shirt was stained. His hair was a mess, and the look of sheer, exhausted defeat on his face was enough to break my heart. And where was Sarah? She was exactly where I always found her, in the master bedroom, which was right off the kitchen, watching Netflix. I could hear the distinct sound of a show through the wall, and I swear I saw the reflection of the screen flicker on the kitchen tile. I didn't even talk to Ethan first. I walked straight over, gently took the crying baby from his carrier, and checked his diaper. Soiled, of course. I took him to the changing table, got him clean, and spent the next 30 minutes soothing him until he was quiet and calm, nestled against my shoulder. While I was doing this, Ethan was frantically trying to salvage whatever he was cooking. Sarah still hadn't emerged from the bedroom. After the baby was settled and the food was ready, I looked at the kitchen. It was still a wreck, but Ethan was too exhausted to notice. I ended up staying for another 2 hours. I wiped down the counters, ran the dishwasher, cleared out the sink, and started a load of laundry, all while Ethan sat on the couch just holding his quiet baby, looking completely vacant. Sarah finally emerged to eat dinner, thanked Ethan for cooking, and then quickly retreated back to the bedroom with her plate. She made no comment about the now clean kitchen, the quiet baby, or the fact that her husband looked like he was suffering from chronic sleep deprivation. When it was time for me to leave, the frustration I had bottled up for weeks finally boiled over. I couldn't leave Ethan like that, and I couldn't leave without addressing the root cause of the crisis. I walked over to the bedroom door where Sarah was lying down again, phone in hand. I forced myself to sound calm, gentle even, but firm. I knew this was the point of no return. "Hey, Sarah, before I go, I just wanted to ask if you're okay." She looked up from her phone, squinted at me, and said, "Yeah, a bit exhausted, you know." That was it. That was the final straw. I looked at her, lying there, exhausted from scrolling on her phone, while my brother was physically and mentally shattering himself trying to keep their entire life afloat. I lost my cool. I didn't yell, but my voice was sharp and cold, cutting through her relaxed facade. I let the truth out, the cold, hard, unvarnished truth that I had been suppressing for months. "I can understand that being a new mom is rough, Sarah." I really can. But Ethan works 40 to 50 hours a week, and he still comes home every single night to clean the house, cook dinner, and take care of the baby while you're in here watching TV. Being a stay-at-home mom doesn't mean that you always have to be in the bed scrolling and watching TV shows. The second those words left my mouth, her face crumpled. She didn't argue, she didn't defend herself, she just immediately started to cry. She didn't cry in frustration. She cried as if I had just revealed a devastating secret about her character. I immediately regretted the delivery, but not the substance of the message. I left the house right then and there. Call came about 20 minutes later, and it was Ethan. I expected a gentle scolding, a request for me to apologize for being harsh. What I got was a brother who was furious. "Maya, what did you say to her? She is devastated. She's saying you attacked her. She won't stop crying." I took a deep breath. "Ethan, I told her the truth. I saw you tonight, you were trying to cook dinner while holding the baby. The house is a wreck. She was watching Netflix while you were losing it. I literally don't have anything against her, but I felt bad for you doing everything by yourself." He didn't listen. He just kept repeating that I had hurt her feelings, that I should have minded my own business, and that I didn't understand how hard it was to be a mother. He was defending her completely, throwing every bit of my help and my concern back in my face. He was still mad at me for saying those things just because I wanted to help him. The resentment I felt towards Sarah suddenly shifted. I felt a wave of profound disappointment in Ethan for not seeing the reality of his own situation, for prioritizing his wife's comfort over his own well-being. The man was so far into the fog of exhaustion that he couldn't even recognize a lifeline when it was thrown to him. He demanded I apologize. I refused. Absolutely refused. I told him I would apologize for the tone, but never for the substance. And that's where things stand. Ethan is now cold and distant, and Sarah won't even look at me. The whole family dynamic is fractured. Was I the asshole for telling my brother's wife that being a stay-at-home mom doesn't mean being a stay-in-bed mom? Did I cross a line that I had no right to cross, even if it was out of genuine fear for my brother's health? The days that followed that confrontation were tense. Ethan would barely return my texts, and when he did, they were short and centered entirely around the baby, avoiding any mention of Sarah or the house. It was clear he was maintaining the wall she had put up. I couldn't stop thinking about how much I wanted to help him. I even considered going back and just apologizing without meaning it just to get my brother back. But the image of him standing in the kitchen, cooking one-handed, haunted me. I knew that if I apologized for the truth, I was validating Sarah's current behavior and effectively signing up for a lifetime of watching my brother break under the pressure. I was stuck in this terrible limbo where silence meant watching my brother suffer, and speaking up meant losing him. I talked to my best friend Chloe about it. I laid out the whole scenario: the 50-hour work week, the messy house, the constant scrolling, and the final breaking point. Chloe, who doesn't have kids, was sympathetic to both sides but ultimately pointed out the obvious. "Maya, if he's working all day to provide the house and she's responsible for managing the home and she's instead making him do her job and his own job, that's not being exhausted, that's unfair delegation. You didn't tell her she wasn't allowed to rest. You told her she couldn't neglect the whole arrangement. Ethan is mad because you made his life harder by making his wife cry, not because you were wrong." Chloe's words were a comforting sanity check. The problem wasn't the words. The problem was that my words had caused an inconvenient emotional reaction that Ethan now had to manage on top of everything else. He was the victim of the situation, and now he felt like he had to protect his aggressor from me, his protector. It's a classic, messed-up emotional dynamic. I realized that what was truly painful was the betrayal from Ethan. He saw my genuine, raw concern, and instead of recognizing the sacrifice I was making, risking our relationship to save him from burnout, he just saw the inconvenience. I had risked everything to give him a clear view of his own crumbling life, and he chose to defend the fog. I finally decided I couldn't apologize for the substance of the comment. Instead, I sent Ethan a long, measured text, avoiding any direct mention of Sarah's actions but focusing only on him. I told him I loved him, that my only goal was to see him healthy and happy, and that I regretted making the situation more stressful for him by causing a conflict. I made it clear I was stepping back and would only be available for emergencies regarding the baby, hoping that the sudden absence of my help would finally force him to look at the unsustainable situation he was in. Stepping back was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I missed my nephew terribly. I missed my casual visits with my brother. But the distance forced a change. A few weeks later, Ethan called me. He wasn't mad, but he sounded drained. He didn't bring up the fight, but he did casually mention that he'd had a serious talk with Sarah about managing the home more efficiently, and that they were trying to hire a mother's helper a few afternoons a week. He never apologized for getting mad at me, but the fact that he was finally addressing the problem, even if it was just to delegate it to someone else, told me that my words had landed. They hadn't landed instantly, and they hadn't landed easily, but they had forced a shift. The relationship between Ethan and me is still healing, but the distance taught me a final, crucial lesson. You can't save someone who is unwilling to be saved, but you can always speak the truth and let them decide what to do with it. My conscience is clear. I stood up for my brother when he couldn't stand up for himself. So, to anyone listening who is watching a loved one disappear under an unfair, unequal burden in their relationship, you might have to cross a line. You might lose them temporarily, and you might take on the villain role. But sometimes, speaking that harsh truth is the only way to shock them out of the exhaustion and into self-preservation. Be prepared for the fallout, but never apologize for trying to protect the people you love. If you've ever had to risk a relationship to speak a difficult truth, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Let's talk about that line between helping and overstepping. And if you enjoyed this raw story about family dynamics, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep sharing these complex, real-life dilemmas. Thanks for watching.